Pakistan, The Constitutional Journey of a Sandwich Civilization by Sai Deepak. And in a little while from now, we'll also be joined by Honorable Mr. Justice Sri V. Subramaniam, Ramasubramaniam, who's from Supreme Court of India. While let me introduce my panelists here. We'd like to extend a special welcome to our chief guest, Dr. Meenakshi Jain. Dr. Jain is presently Senior Fellow at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. Her areas of research include cultural and religious developments in Indian history. In 2020, she was awarded the Padma Shri by the Government of India for her contribution in the field of literature and education. And now I'd like to introduce our another panelist, our esteemed moderator and panelist, Dr. Anand Ranganathan. But I'm sure a lot of people are aware he is already teaching as a professor in Special Center for Molecular Medicine at JNU Delhi. And he's pretty regular. He writes and appears frequently on television debates on politics and media and science. And his columns have appeared in Swarajya, DNA, First Post, and News Laundry. And of course, he's written 3 books earlier, and the 4th one is, I think, is just in this year, it'll be coming? Yeah, great. It will be from Penguin. And now a special mention for our coveted author, Mr. Sai Deepak. Can we please welcome Honorable Mr. Justice Sri V. Ramasubramaniam. She just arrived to the Supreme Court. So I was talking about the author. Sai Deepak is an engineer turned litigator practicing as an arguing counsel primarily before the Supreme Court of India and the High Court of Delhi. A mechanical engineer from Anna University, he graduated with bachelor's degree in law from IIT Kharagpur. IIT Kharagpur's law school in 2009, and has carved a niche for himself as a litigator in civil, commercial, and constitutional matters. In 2019, he was awarded the Young Alumni Achievers Award by his alma mater, IIT Kharagpur. Apart from delivering lectures on the constitutional issues, he is a prolific writer for leading newspapers and magazines. India, Bharat and Pakistan, the second book of the Bharat trilogy, takes the discussion forward from its best-selling predecessor, India, that is Bharat. That was the first book that came in 2021, and that was also a huge bestseller. Yeah. And now, can I just request our panelists, Dr. Meenakshi Jain, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, and Sai Deepak ji to please unveil the book, release the book. Not at all.
Thank you, first of all, for turning up in such huge numbers. And I'm bound to be accused of deliberately booking a small venue to give the impression that there's a lot of crowd here. But this was not the case. This was the best we could get because it seems like the other venues are taken. But thank you so much, and thanks to the students for treating this like a pathshala. Grateful. And with Dr. Jain here, I think this is the way to go about it. All of us are actually sitting at our feet and learning. So, thanks to Justice Ramasubramaniam for having made it here. And for members of the legal fraternity for having taken time out of their schedules to come here. I can see a lot of familiar faces here. To answer Anand's question, I consciously tried not to be influenced by Dr. Ambedkar's book whatsoever. And I did use Venkat Dhulipala as a reference to the first book as well as to the second book. But there's a significant distinction, and I'll explain why. Venkat Dhulipala's book effectively starts from the 1937 session. I think it's the Lahore session that he refers to. And he traces and charts the genesis of Pakistan from 1937. And Dr. Ambedkar effectively looks at it more from the perspective of Syed Ahmad Khan, with a cursory reference to the Islamic invasions. But the mindset does not get the kind of expansive treatment that it deserves. And therefore, what I have done as part of this book is to go back to the fall of the Mughal Empire, the decline of the Mughal Empire, after the sack of Delhi by Nadir Shah in 1739. And the fundamental question that I have asked myself is, has the loss of state power resulted in loss of consciousness as far as a particular group is concerned? Or have they managed to reinvent themselves and come out through multiple movements? Because you see, whenever you talk of Pakistan, the earliest we are able to go to is Syed Ahmad Khan. But Syed Ahmad Khan himself is the product of a larger movement and merely one representative of one particular strand of thought in that particular movement. That he was the product of a particular seminary, which is based out of Delhi, which is called Madrasa-e-Rahimiyya, which is where I think the history of Bharat takes a very crucial turn from 1740 onwards. The history of that particular seminary, coupled with the kind of individuals that were produced by it, along with all the movements that each of them gave birth to. At least 6 movements post, I'd say, the fall of the Wahhabi movement were given birth to by people who were disciples of that particular seminary. Syed Ahmad Khan was but one of the disciples. And therefore, you end up knowing more about him simply because he established an institution called the Aligarh Muslim University. But beyond that, there is not much to be understood. So, which is exactly why what I've done is, if Venkat Dhulipala starts from 1937, my book ends in December 1924. So I am actually showing that the thought and the beej and the seed of Pakistan has come into existence well before 1937, at least by December 1924. But the germ for that particular seed and the thought process started in 1740 at the very least. That is the thesis of this particular book. And therefore, the only perhaps similarity between my book and Dr. Ambedkar's approach is that both of us speak like lawyers through this book, which is to say, if this is the position, where is the evidence to support it and back it up? That's it. So most of the book covers that. But since this is a continuum as far as the previous book is concerned, how do you relate both the books? The first book effectively looks at the Christian European line, starting from, let's say, Christopher Columbus onwards until the first Government of India Act of 1919. In chapter 6 of that book, I've already hinted at the possibility of a different scope, where I've spoken of Middle Eastern coloniality in chapter 6 of the first book. But since that concept was merely touched upon and not given sufficient treatment, I realized that it would make no sense whatsoever not to discuss it further, because you are not going to be able to discuss the Constitution without touching upon partition, and partition was not an overnight development. In which case, the central question that I would end up asking myself is, did the partition make any difference to the thought process of the Constituent Assembly when they were discussing the Constitution? The Constituent Assembly effectively comes into existence in May 1946. When did Direct Action Day take place? 16th August 1946. So while the Constituent Assembly was discussing the Samvidhan, people were being butchered left, right, and center in Bengal and Punjab. So were you even cognizant of the motivations behind this, that the two-nation theory was actually playing itself out on the ground while you were discussing this constitution? This is the question that I'm trying to ask. The other, let's say, question that I'm trying to take a serious pot shot at and hoping to bust it completely is, every time we discuss the partition of Bharat, allow me to be blunt here, which is the stupidest answer that is given is the British did this thanks to their divide and rule policy, as if everybody else was innocent. Now, you're dealing with adults. So if someone is dividing and ruling you, clearly there is a pre-existing division that he is taking advantage of. So the point that I'm trying to make here is he did not create a division, he merely exploited a pre-existing division which outlasted their advent by at least 1,000 years. And therefore, I'm trying to ask myself, did they actually consciously collaborate with each other to lead towards the partition? Was there a conscious handshake between the British mindset and, let's say, the Shah Waliullah Dehlavi mindset? This is the question that I'm asking. And I have come to the conclusion that you must read the book. So, as far as I'm concerned, Dr. Ambedkar's analysis was more from the perspective of whether the eventuality of Pakistan can be done away with, can it be stalled, can it be prevented, because he published his book in 1946. Similarly, India Divided is a book that's published by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, which is also referred to in this book. And all of them were trying to publish literature to say, no, the two-nation theory doesn't work. So Dr. Ambedkar accepts the two-nation theory. Rajendra Prasad says the two-nation theory doesn't work. It doesn't exist. It's a figment of imagination. So all those works were looked at, but since the analysis of that consciousness which drives this entire movement was missing in Dr. Ambedkar's book, I thought it's an important gap to be filled up. So think of it this way, the Christian line, European line comes in the first book. The second book brings both the Islamic line as well as the Christian line, and then they merge. Once they have merged, from December 1924, how do they move forward? And by December 1924, was it clear to the so-called leaders of our independence movement that you're staring at a formidable alliance which is working to the detriment of the native consciousness? In the process of this analysis, what I've also done is examined truly what is the so-called independence movement? Were we even asking for independence in the first place? When did the question actually come about? And who should be given credit for it rightly so, is the question that I'm asking. The marginalized group of the independence movement, the revolutionaries, how much they were single-handedly responsible for pushing the collaborators of the British to take a pro-independence position, is a question that I'm asking in this book. So these are the broad questions that I have raised. And I'm also trying to consciously take down certain icons who have been valorized for no reason and to the detriment of our own understanding and our own, let's say, understanding of history. So there is a conscious attempt to use the literature to say, perhaps some people are under focus beyond necessary, and some people who should have been given their due, who were literally giving their lives, not in, let's say, 5-star jails, but in, let's say, in torture cells and in Kalapani and whatnot. Namaste. Please, Mr. Sanyal's here. Deserved. And since I spoke of revolutionaries from Bengal, I think his entry is apt. So he's just landed in Delhi. He's been kind enough to show up. Thank you, Dada. Thank you so much. So these are the different issues that I've tried to address. And the other thing that I'm also asking myself is, are we in the midst of a repeat of history? Whether, because this is not an academic exercise whatsoever. If the first book was relatively academic because I'm raising certain fundamental theoretical questions, the practicals and the demonstration has started in the second book. Effectively saying, now that I have given certain theoretical questions, let's start the work. Which is to say, apply it and ask yourself whether you can draw a one-on-one correspondence between what happened in the 1920s and what's happening currently. These are the fundamental questions. So the long answer to your short question is, while they were certain benchmarks, they were benchmarks from the perspective of what they have not covered, so that this forms an additional corpus that people can read along with it. In that sense, As a student of history, I found Venkat Dhulipala's book much more rigorous and way more prescient from the perspective of predicting what could happen, because I don't think Venkat Dhulipala's exercise was archival in nature. He wasn't merely examining past. So in that sense, I would say that Venkat Dhulipala's work has influenced me more than perhaps Dr. Ambedkar's, because Dhulipala has the luxury of examining more material. He is not looking at the specter of partition. It's not 1946. So he has been able to collect better material in that sense. So that would be the long answer to the short question. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Sai. Can you hear me?